Good afternoon, Climate Summit. Clearly, we left the best for last, right? Well, thank you for the invitation, Jennifer. Nice to see all of you. Let's start with the bottom line. The health and well-being of our community depends upon the health and resilience of our natural environment. Full stop. As our population grows, so do the stresses on our environment and the natural systems that support us. We all care about environmental degradation, and we want somebody to do something about it. As we've heard over the last 2 days, our government and NGO partners are doing something about it. But sometimes that somebody is actually all of us every day. So today I want to talk to you about everyday resilience, solutions from the Green Living Toolkit. So here we are, introducing the Green Living Toolkit. Love life, live green. You can find it at greenlivingtoolkit.org. It's a collaborative project of the Science and Environment Council of Southwest Florida, which, as Jennifer described, is a consortium of 40 science-based environmental organizations working from Charlotte Harbor to Tampa Bay. I serve as the co-executive director and have the privilege of organizing projects like these that really take the best of what all of our member organizations have, their knowledge, their resources, and put them together in projects that no one organization might do on their own. So together, we can accomplish some pretty cool things. So introducing the Green Living Toolkit. It's designed to help residents, all of us, to get laser focused on the most effective and achievable solutions for sustainable living on the Sun Coast. The Green Living Toolkit is the first of its kind essential guide to sustainable energy, waste recovery, water protection, food, and nature assembled all in one place. The toolkit includes the best step-by-step guides, tools, calculators, incentives, videos, plus, importantly, local resources and experts with their email and phone numbers that you can call to get assistance. Our creation originated on the idea that there's a growing personal interest among residents in living a more sustainable lifestyle. And their first stop to learn how is usually Google, where they find a fire hose of information. Some expert, some not so much, some current, some outdated. Even the good stuff is scattered and piecemeal. So we together curated and consolidated the best advice and information from our local partners and served it up in one easily accessible place with real experts to back it up. We promote this site with $10,000 a month in a Google ad grant, and that helps people find it when they're cruising around on Google. The big idea was to create the Green Living Toolkit as an internet funnel that could capture, inform, and deliver activated people to our community partners. We draw them in and then send them out with good information to the right people. Can you fire up the website? My intro was so good. You were so captivated. You forgot. All right, so let's take a look at the Green Living Toolkit. Let's take it for a spin. I'm going to show you some of its features as an education and communication tool. Let's see, got it. All right, so it's organized around 5 topics. And each of these topics has 3 major action pages. So we've got energy, basically conserve energy, then go solar. food, grow food garden, eat local sustainable food, reduce food waste, then compost, waste reduction, reduce single-use plastics, reuse, repurpose, and restore, and recycle right. Under water protection, we've got water conservation, saving water indoors, cutting water and curbing pollution outdoors, and neighborhood solutions for being a catalyst for clean water. And finally, nature, both appreciating and protecting nature, get out and explore, keep wildlife safe, and support backyard wildlife. So the top 15 solutions here were curated by our team, and they were selected because they are, number one, the most impactful solutions. I mean, there's a million out there that we could be doing, but we wanted to hone it down to really reduce that fire hose, so to speak. They are readily doable by a regular person, and they are solutions where there are local organizations and resources ready to help residents take the next step. Now, we also recognize that having a community connection and a social point of entry is also a really important aspect of activation. So we curate and maintain a community-wide calendar of environmental events from more than 100 Suncoast organizations. So here we are, today's date, see what's happening. Oh, look, there's a climate summit going on at the Collaboratory. Sounds pretty cool. So we cover events such as sustainability classes, tours, festivals, farmers markets, but also opportunities to volunteer and to speak up for a cause. Over here, we've also created a comprehensive set of FAQs. And each of the FAQs tie back to action page content. I love these. We really try to avoid platitudes here and really just cut right to the inconvenient truth of it. How do I get rid of mosquitoes in my stormwater pond? Eat local sounds nice, but isn't small scale local farming an inefficient way to feed the world? Where does my tap water come from? Is it safe, or should I choose bottled water instead? So these are real questions that real people have. So let's take a look around. I want to show you some of the action pages. We'll dive a little deeper and see how the solutions are organized. I want to show you just 3 examples. Let's start here. So this is an everyday solution for resilience, especially in the face of continued development in Southwest Florida and the loss of Florida's natural areas that we've heard all about over the last 2 days. Support backyard wildlife. So this page shows in just a few steps how to turn your backyard into an oasis for birds and pollinators by providing the essentials, basically just food, water, shelter, and peace and quiet. So step 1, go native, convert your yard from whatever exotics are in it to native, get rid of the invasives. And this can provide shelter as well as food in form of nuts and berries and flowers. Wet their whistle, make sure that there's a source of drinking water, a clean bird bath, for example, located off the ground or on the ground for different types of critters. Fun ways to build a house, bird houses, bat houses, owl houses. Step 2, provide peace and quiet. So we emphasize the importance of darkness for wildlife, lights out for wildlife, how to design lighting if it's necessary outdoors at night, nix the noise, and cut the chemicals. So each page, some of the pages have next level strategies in case you've accomplished all that. Here you can get your instructions for how to certify your yard as wildlife friendly. But all pages end in these two important resource blocks. Get involved, which shows various opportunities to volunteer with organizations. It links back to our events calendar. So it's really a way to make a social connection, meet people, like-minded people, and become part of the community. Resources and more. Here we have a specially curated list of resource guides, the best that we could find from our partners and beyond. So these are the guides that you would need to go a little deeper, the real step-by-steps. How do you choose those lighting fixtures for your nighttime yard? And then, of course, all important people to talk to, and they have access to both phone and email. So let's take a look at a second example. Slide over here to food. Again, another action that builds community resilience. Eat local sustainable food. The first recommendation here is to eat lower on the food chain. Mom was right. Eat more vegetables. And here and on a few of the other action pages, we have created original detailed footprint calculators. And these are meant to really illustrate and motivate people to know that the small changes that they are making really can have an impact. So here's our calculator that quantifies the environmental benefits of reducing meat consumption. We call it our meat footprint calculator. I'm going to zoom down and take a look at that. So this is pretty cool. You can calculate based upon how much meat of different types, poultry, pork, and beef, that you eat every week, and your pledge to reduce that meat consumption by some percentage. You can see what that impact is. Nicole, can you type me up? Let's see, 4-ounce serving. Let's say we had a turkey sandwich every day. So let's do 4 times 7, type me 28. Pork, don't eat pork. Beef, let's say beef is what's for dinner. So we're going to have beef every night for, let's say, another 28 ounces of beef. Oops, there you go. And then let's say we already do meatless Mondays, or we think meatless Mondays is not quite enough. Let's do 50% reduction. Okay. Okay, so what we've typed in here, the orange lines are our consumption. The gray line represents sort of the typical average. And here are the calculations. So it shows the impact, the first column, impact of eating meat, that amount of meat for 1 year, pounds of meat, the number of chickens you ate, number of pigs, number of cows, kind of puts a face on it, right? The gallons of water necessary to produce that meat, the pounds of carbon dioxide emitted. Now we can look at the second column and see the reduction. In some cases, it's a 50% reduction, but when we get down to gallons of water and pounds of carbon dioxide, we have to remember that it does take some water and produce some carbon to create a soy-based protein alternative. So here's our savings. So if you eat that amount of meat, it's like running your faucet for 136 days straight in terms of water use. Now with 50% reduction, it's only like running your faucet for 73 days. Here's the greenhouse gas equivalents: acres of forest growing over a year, tree seedlings growing for 10 years, or a gas-powered car getting 22.5 miles per gallon. So that's an example of one of our calculators that we utilized information, reliable information from government sources to feed it into an Excel worksheet that's kind of working in the background. All right, let me show you one final example from the energy solution set. Give your home an energy tune-up. So there's a lot said about solar and the cost of solar, But for most regular people, they can get huge savings, money savings and energy and electricity savings just by giving their home a tune-up. We created this interactive infographic to show that for a typical Florida home, the top energy hog is our HVAC, our heating and cooling. In our area, it's AC, right? And in this graphic, it shows you exactly where all of the energy for heating and cooling is being used. We can look and see the impact of that pool pump that runs all afternoon, every single day. Our water heater, cooking and cleaning, various draws from appliances, electronics, the always on vampire electronics that just suck electricity 24 hours a day, whether you're using that component or not. And finally, to a smaller degree, lighting. Here again, we have an energy savings calculator, which is very detailed to show if you change your behavior on any of the recommendations on this page, it'll show you immediately what your savings are in terms of kilowatt hours per month, electricity rates, assuming FPL rates in your dollars per month bill, and tons of greenhouse gases. For example, turning up your thermostat to 78 degrees, installing a smart thermostat, lowering the temperature of your hot water heater, doing your laundry in cold water, et cetera, et cetera. So this can give you detailed information. And then again, it translates it into some greenhouse gas equivalents so that folks can really see the impact of changing just small bits of their behaviors to become more resilient. So to sum it up, the Green Living Toolkit is an education and communications tool showcasing sustainability solutions for everyday resilience. Every day, everyone, there's something in here that we can all adopt to build regional resilience. With each action, our personal and community resilience grows, from your family's health and wellness to your personal savings, property value, ecosystem health, and community prosperity. It all is tied together. So I invite you to explore the Green Living Toolkit on your own, greenlivingtoolkit.org, to find your solutions for everyday resilience. I also invite you to come up to Sarasota. Thanks for the reminder. Come up to Sarasota in December 2nd and 3rd. It's a Saturday, Sunday. We are turning the Green Living Toolkit into a live event. We are organizing the first of its kind Green Living Home Expo, which will be like a trade show for sustainable solutions. So you can come, it's all day Saturday, all day Sunday at the Sarasota Municipal Auditorium, and get hands-on, buy products, sign up for services, and learn as much as you're able to press into your head in one day. That'll be followed on the following Tuesday and Wednesday with our regional eco summit. So keep your ears peeled for that as well. That'll be December 5th and 6th. There you have it. Thanks so much.
All right. We're going to now turn it over to Dr. Anna Puszkin-Chevlin. Not quite to Q&A yet, but we're going to go back to that right after this next presentation. So we're just queuing up the PowerPoint. Can you hear us, Anna?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're a little quiet. If there's any way to boost your volume just a tad, that'd be great.
Any better?
Yeah. No, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody who stuck it out to the last session of the second day. You are the diehards, and I really appreciate you being here. I also want to thank Jennifer for putting on an incredibly informative summit. I've learned so much in the past 2 days. So I want to impart a little inspiration, because being part of a group like this, all of us who are here and committed to this issue, we get charged up. And what I want to try to communicate to you is how we can charge up everybody else. Because ultimately, like we all know, we can't change the world without everybody's help. And so we have to get more people thinking the way we are. So let's find out what they're thinking. Next slide, please. So we know that when we want to talk about climate change, we're kind of all nervous. You just don't know outside of your immediate circle what people think about this. And we know it's polarizing, and we know this topic has been politicized. So people tread very lightly on talking about climate change, which is unfortunate because we need to do quite a bit of talking about this and explaining all these tools like what my last speaker was talking about. How do we get everybody on board that train? The best way is to talk, but to feel a little more comfortable and to develop an approach that's effective, it's really important to know, what are they thinking? What are people's thoughts around this? How do we unpack the narratives among different segments of our population to develop a message that won't be polarizing, but that might be intriguing, engaging, or inspirational to them? So Growing Climate Solutions has been doing this for about 3 years now. And we started in 2018 following a survey that was done by the Collier Community Foundation and the Conservancy, taking a pulse of what climate attitudes were, especially post-Irma. And 3.5 years or 4 years later, we wanted to replicate that study and get a pulse of how things have changed. Has there been a shift? So we conducted a poll, a survey in 2022 in April, just about a year or so ago, to see how those metrics have evolved and try to hone our message based on those metrics. Next slide, please. Now, the survey was conducted by our partners that you can see in the bottom left, right-hand corner, Lake Research Partners, a national polling organization with offices in California and Washington, D.C. And they sent out a random, they sampled a random population via an email solicitation and text message to ascertain 400 responses in Southwest Florida. And the self-reported demographics are pretty representative of our population there. It was a 51 to 49 gender split. We had mostly people over 50, you can see, representative of our retired population. Many of them were non-college grads, but it was pretty evenly split. It was 82% Caucasian, which is telling, and 10% Hispanic. It was heavily Lee County based. 55% of the respondents were from Lee, only a third from Collier and less from Charlotte. And we also realized that we had a demographic or political split that was about 42% Republican, 30% Democrat, 7% independent, and others did not declare. So overall, it was a well-rounded sample that's representative of our area. But we also have to take into consideration, as I go through the rest of this presentation, that the survey was conducted the 3rd week of April, and the war in Ukraine had started about a month and a half before, in March. Energy was a really big issue. Gas prices were going up, inflation was going up. There were some underlying concerns that were not present in the 2018 study, and we did it before Hurricane Ian. The first study was post-Irma. Had we waited 6 months later, post-Ian, maybe some of this would have shifted a little. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the data. I'm going to not present the whole study. We did 54 questions, and we can provide you a link to the entire data set. I'm just going to highlight some key messages. Next slide, please. So what are the beliefs around whether the climate is changing? We found out that in our region, 68% of people believe that climate is changing and 23% don't. And that is a decline from 2018, where we had 75% of people saying the climate was changing and only 12% did not believe it was happening. What's interesting is the people that are not sure, I think they've been exposed to a lot more information, and people are choosing, let's say, positions on this. And this may not be, it looks kind of bewildering. 68%, only 68% believe climate's changing. Actually, if you ask the question different ways, you can play with those numbers. We asked it in a couple of ways. When we asked whether climate change was happening due to natural cycles or man-made anthropogenic inputs, we had a substantial number of people agree that climate is changing, but for natural causes. That would drive the overall it's happening number to almost 80%. About 12% of the people believe it's natural causes. But that only tells us that we have to do quite a bit more educating. Next slide, please. Clearly, there is some misunderstanding about what the climate drivers are and what are the key issues we have to educate on. Now, before I move on, even though that number seems shocking, in context to the United States, the Yale study that comes out of the Yale University found that 68% is pretty consistent nationwide. It's a little higher, 70%. But I also checked that if you go back to 10 years, 51% of Americans believe that the universe was created with the Big Bang, and 49% are not sure. So there is this overall misunderstanding or lack of belief in science. You can look at other studies or that are not climate measures and find a healthy amount of skepticism. But as that aside, what should we be educating people on? How can we move the needle in this regard? So one of the things that we did find out is that economics at that point in time were a really important issue. Next slide, please. The survey found out that 53% of those surveyed would prioritize economic growth over climate issues. And I attribute that, and we talked about this extensively with the partners at Lake, that there were certain issues going on with the rising cost of gasoline at that time and energy independence that were really quite dominant. But that couldn't explain everything, because this question really tells us a lot. In 2018, 54% of those surveyed believed that addressing climate would help the economy, and only 24% thought that it would harm the economy. 4 years later, the number of people who believe it would help the economy went down to 39%, and the number that thought it would harm the economy went up from 24% to 41%. Even more telling, look at the yellow shading. There are two colors there. The people that believe it would harm it a lot went from 9% to 34%. So people really shifted their belief system, and the diehards, it got more polarized, right? And that is where I think the first message lies. We really have to work on this. Next slide, please. So my first message when I talk to people that are really concerned about economic growth is that climate action is really good for the economy. And there are two ways to approach that topic. At the macro level, we can talk about clean technologies can fuel economic growth and are a good job creator. In fact, for about 10 years, we've been talking about getting more kids into STEM and math and engineering and science. Well, where are we going to employ all those young new job seekers? They're not going to want to be in a service economy serving, in a kitchen. They're going to want those high-tech, well-paid jobs. And creating or moving our economy toward a clean energy technology is a great employment booster. We need to get the numbers around that and show those charts and graphs. Secondly, the other argument is that we can't afford to be a market lagger. In fact, the growth that the United States experienced in the last century, the growth that made our economy one of the strongest on the planet, was our ability to keep moving the needle in aerospace, in airline travel, in computer technology. These were the sectors where we exported our technology to other parts of the planet. And we have to convince people that in the new economy, we have to be the leaders in energy development and in new technologies that reduce energy, that create energy conservation and deal with waste and deal with changing climate conditions. Finally, the other macro issue is to talk to people about how positive climate action can reduce risk and increase returns. So we're seeing and experiencing a high inflation moment in our economy. Many people attribute that to supply chain issues related to the pandemic and their lingering effects. Well, at the same time, if unabated, climate will create similar issues in supply risk or supply chain issues. When we have these weather events, when planes can't fly, when things get grounded, when there's a freeze, goods and services don't move and the economy slows down. So anything we can do to manage and adapt to those changes will keep our economy strong. The macro discussion doesn't always work with everybody, especially people who can't quite understand those relationships. And for that population, you can really talk about it in a more local and personal way. Sea level rise and flooding will lower property values. It'll make it hard and more expensive to get insurance. And without insurance, we can't have a good real estate market. It's hard to trade property without insurance. So bringing those issues down to something they've experienced is very helpful. Likewise, environmental health, a good coastal ecology, a healthy water system is also very important for our tourism base and for other aspects of our economy. People come here for the nice weather, the nice beaches, and the unique ecology. If we mess that up, the number of people coming down here might slow down. Or if it gets really hot early in the season when we get all our visitors may get shortened. And every day that season gets shortened, that's less retail dollars, less service dollars coming into our economy. Another point that sometimes works when you're talking to people is to talk about the fair share of investment. In other words, other communities in our state are already gearing up for climate adaptation, and they are getting grants, and there is funding out there for these changes. If we don't get projects queued up, we're losing our fair share. That money will go to other communities. And why shouldn't we as taxpayers have that investment come to our community as well? So we've talked about it in that way. And the final issue, and I think this relates to those personal consumption patterns, is that doing the right thing, leading a more sustainable lifestyle, will not decrease your quality of life. It can save you money. It can make you eligible for some tax rebates. You can drive an electric car. It can have really good pickup. It can go from 0 to 60 or 80 just as well as your gasoline powered and fossil fuel vehicles. So these are kind of issues that we have to talk about that resonate with this population. Next slide, please. Another outcome that we picked up from reading the data was that the majority of our residents want government to protect our coastlines. 80% or 79 agreed that both local, state, and federal government should do more to protect our natural coastlands and wetlands. Now, putting this discussion in strict climate sense sometimes lowers the acceptability. So if you talk about protecting our coastlines because of extreme weather and storms, that number goes down to 68%. If you talk about how mangroves protect us from sea level rise or need to adapt to sea level rise, it goes down to 62%. There is a partisan split. But if you frame it from a conservationist point of view, that this is just healthy for our natural ecosystems, you get a very strong and overwhelmingly positive approach that we need to address this. Next slide. However, the relationship between what we think government should do is a little interesting, and I'll show you some interesting data. We want the government to protect all people from the impacts of extreme weather. That number went down from 67% to 54%. I wonder if it would be different today, post Ian. This was April, and the 67% number was post Irma. But overall, all of our respondents believe that our communities need to adapt to flood and drought. That's overwhelmingly 82% with very little change. Now, here's an interesting question. When we ask, could we address climate change effectively, but our government is broken and can't agree how to do it, we got 68% of people agreeing with that statement, and that was across political lines. So there is the sense that we should be doing something, but maybe government is ineffective as the vehicle to do it. And that's an interesting narrative to unpack. There's more information about that in the study, but we know that we need to address climate change, and there is overall a belief that we should reduce, that America can and should reduce the pollution. So what is the role of government has to be part of our talking points. Next slide, please. So the message here is, as professionals in this field, we have to explain and show through example that government is a really valuable player in helping us address our climate challenges. They are the source of the large amount of funding that will be needed to upgrade really large infrastructure projects, ports, airports, shipping ports, rail lines, highways, water systems. These are really big projects that are multi-jurisdictional and long-term, and government is very good at doing those kind of projects. They're also very helpful in incentivizing the kind of research we need to develop these new technologies. We made huge strides in medicine, in large part because we incentivized innovative research, and that is needed in this field as well. We also have to find common ground on where government should intervene and what are the kind of projects that are bipartisan in support and that people can understand. So we can highlight how in the past, the EPA cleaned up the rivers in this country when in the 60s, the Cayuga was on fire in Ohio. And what are those kind of examples today? What can they do? Data collection, satellite reconnaissance. We need to keep all of that data to support our analysis and our path forward. We also need to talk to our constituents about thanking policymakers when they make good decisions. Having been on the other side of that, they hear a lot about when people disagree with decisions, but the thank you letter or the attaboy or attagirl is far and few between. So you get a lot more with honey. So every time you see someone going out and making a courageous decision, put a note in there. We really appreciate the interest you took in this project and the decisions to support climate action. It's super important to keep the ball rolling forward. Next slide. Another important message that we got from the data is that clean water, clean air, even clean energy are foundational values that almost everybody supports. This was bipartisan. We asked, do you have a right to clean water? Is that a critical right for all people? And 90% of people responded yes. Same with clean air. 83% believe that everybody has the right to breathe healthy and clean air. Even the moral responsibility for a safe and healthy climate for ourselves and children, a future-oriented position, got 81% vote. So framing these issues in terms of conservation is super important. Next slide. However, here's where I told you to look at the issue with the government and the trust in government in an interesting way. And we have to unpack this very carefully. We asked, what kind of things would you support to advance climate? And we had overwhelming support for both investment, for incentives, and even for regulation of market actors. 85% of the respondents want to see the grid modernized. 74% believe that polluters, corporate polluters, should be charged a fee. But who is charging that fee? That is a jurisdiction or a government body that would do that. Same thing with providing corporate tax credits to expand clean energy, or even the last one, providing incentives for people to switch to solar. There was 70% support for that, but those incentives, they're created by government. So while people are skeptical about government's effectiveness, they do want government to play in the sandbox. And we have to work really carefully through how we promote these policies to address these issues, because there is support, but we have to frame it right. Next, please. So the way I convert some of this message is I try to really frame it in terms of conservation of nature. If we conserve water, if we have clean energy, it supports human health, it supports ecological health, it improves the quality of life for everyone. And by the way, it also makes us more resilient. So we don't always have to frame the argument with climate in their face. We can just have people support these for whatever reason they feel is the real good reason. And we're still getting, in terms of policy advancement, what we know we need, which is protection of our water supply, conservation of open space, and ways of reducing the amount of fossil fuel. I also talk a lot about promoting green infrastructure. We had a summit a couple of weeks ago in January, and 254 people met, and the one approach to climate change that resonated in over every discussion group was, we need to implement more green infrastructure projects in our region. Green infrastructure is very popular because, one, it mimics nature, and people believe that let nature do its thing. And if we restore the ecosystem and we restore ecosystem benefits, we will more broadly help the ecology, and conservationists feel very comfortable. Also, green infrastructure projects tend to look pretty. They tend to look like what people are accustomed to. People would like to look out onto a forest or onto a green field. They're more apprehensive when they see a lot of cement and cinder blocks and people paving over paradise. So it's really easy to pitch a swale or a land conservation project or a water restoration or a preservation of an estuary, or even science collecting that. People want to protect those special places. Next slide, please. Finally, and this wraps around to Dr. Schaeffer's previous conversation or presentation, we really have to tell people that their personal actions are important. That number had slipped. In 2018, 67% of our respondents believed that they can personally reduce pollution that causes climate change. And that number went down by 10 points. So did the number about the urgency of doing it now. I need to take action now, went down from 70% to 55%. That's pretty alarming. And overall, people believe that we can reduce this pollution. 70% of the respondents believe that it is possible. So we have to talk to people about how to do that in real actionable ways. I love the toolkit that was presented because most people want to know what they can do tomorrow. Next slide, please. So the fourth message that we want people to take home and that we want you to share is that individually, as a consumer, as the head of a household, your actions can make a difference. You should share examples with your friends and with your relatives about things that you do to be more sustainable and are not a sacrifice. Because when the people that you're interacting with, they trust you. Many of these studies show that the most effective speaker is a trusted advisor. So tell your mother, because they know you and they know that you're not crazy and they know that you believe in this. I know you believe in it because it's 5 minutes to 4 on the last session of the day and you're all listening to this. So these people around you, they think of you as the expert and they trust your opinions. So share your personal stories with them and showcase your green technology and things that you do with others. So I recently made a commitment to making my next car electric, and I did. And I purchased a plug-in hybrid. And everywhere I go, I talk about my plug-in hybrid. I let people go in the ride. I talk about how much I love it. And I've gotten 3 or 4 of my friends to say, you know, I never thought it could ride so smoothly, or this is really comfortable and the dashboard isn't weird. So talking about your solar installation, showing somebody that you compost and how you do it, even bragging about the tomatoes that you grow in your backyard. This will encourage other people to adopt the same kind of behaviors. And slowly we can sort of change the consumer preferences and make these what is now considered the green choice, make that the default choice. So with that, I thank you all, and I thank Jennifer for such an important presentation. I hope that you can take these messages forward and be inspired and inspire others, because we're going to need everybody in the game. Thanks so much.
Well, I hope you can hear the resounding applause in the room. And I just, am inspired by both of you. And I think that what we've gotten are really practical actions and advisement on what we can do as kind of leaders. Those of you in this room still, you are leaders in this movement in Southwest Florida. Let me tell you, at this point, we have a lot of work to do. We now know some of the key ways that we can influence people, some of the key messages we need to focus more on with education. So we're going to now take some questions and then conclude. But I think, let me start with, it takes 1,242 gallons of water to produce 2.2 pounds of powdered breast milk substitute. I've been seeing this, so I know someone in the crowd is very much in favor of breastfeeding. Would you like more information on adding this to your toolkit as something that might be a strategy for helping to promote sustainable living for? Okay, there you go. She's already putting it as an FAQ. Let's
So send me the info.
Yes. All right. So you have her email in your proceedings, so feel free to contact her directly. Does the Green Living Toolkit continue to be updated from time to time, or where are you all with that?
We update we've got about 700 outgoing links, so that requires some attention. About every 6 months, we go through and make sure the links are still working. We update the calendar twice a month. We update the FAQ when interesting things come up. With regard to the detailed statistics, the copy, the links to particular resources, no, that the toolkit is still fairly new. More or less, it's up to date still. What we're trying to do is grow web traffic using, in part, our Google Ad grant and word of mouth and backlinks from our partners. Grow web traffic so that we can take on sponsors who will have their corporate logo, in the appropriate place. For example, a solar company could have theirs on the solar page, and that would give us the revenue to keep it up to date and keep the events calendar going, etc.
And so what are some places that people can look for resources on educating about climate action helping the economy? If that's a key message, where do we find the information to help to educate people about that connection between how climate action and resiliency work can actually boost our economy?
That's an excellent question, and I have started to delve into that. I don't have a straight answer. I tend to follow some of the news feeds on climate and the headlines that, like, Forbes puts out. The insurance industry and the reinsurance industry also puts out data on reducing risk, and I nitpick and save those little quotes from their reports. I follow McKinsey and their reports. They write a lot of stuff on green and how companies are improving their outcomes and their stock. They correlate it to stock price. So I follow McKinsey and Company. Whenever something comes out, I sort of pick and choose and copy and paste into a big Word file these little quotes, and I try to keep them updated. So look in the business sector, look at McKinsey, look at the consulting firms, look through the insurance industry.
All right, the next question is, in Cape Coral, many people turn on very bright lights at night. Do you have flyers that can be left in mailboxes? How do you advise people dealing with this issue?
I would suggest going to the Green Living Toolkit. I believe there's a flyer there that you can download. That's an information flyer about the importance of darkness at night and with some advice on various fixtures. So that could be a handout. And I think for most people, there are two issues. One, the biggest one is security. So bright lights at night give people comfort that they're secure. So perhaps there are other means for making that neighborhood feel more secure, or making those particular residents feel more secure. The other one is more of a sort of an aesthetic look, to have the uplights on your palm trees or whatever. And I think that's just a matter of indicating, what the trade-offs are, the aesthetic versus the impacts to the night sky and to wildlife. There's a really interesting statistic on the Green Living Toolkit that came from the literature that we reviewed, suggesting that the number of the percentage of mammals that are becoming nocturnal is actually increasing. That more mammals are becoming nocturnal, adapting their behaviors to be nocturnal because of the chaos and the mayhem during the waking hours when we're all out making noise and driving our cars around and running lawnmowers, et cetera. So the peace and quiet is at night, but the light is still an issue.
For both presenters, small scale is great. How much energy is your home using as an example? But how can we create large scale change with opinion statistics like people thinking green energy will harm the economy? How do we translate that? I think we heard a little bit like, first of being role models and trying to show by our own examples, but do you have other ideas as to how we can scale this up and get more people behind it to overcome those concerns that you found in your survey, Dr. Puszkin-Chevlin?
Well, first, just it's Anna is fine.
Okay.
So, yeah. So that is a big question that I have been asked. How do you create systemic change? It's great if you do it, but what can you do to make those changes systemic? And I think that part of that starts with the connection to representatives, is sharing, people follow their leaders. And if the message is going out from top leadership that this harms the economy, then people start repeating that message over and over again. And people repeat the messages that they hear on television from people that they feel are influential. If you dig into the data set, and I put the link into the chat, we did ask which type of sources do you find credible in terms of climate change? And it was, pretty partisan divide, people that support the governor's information versus the president's information. Scientists are among the most credible communicators. So scientists have a unique position of being able to communicate that. So scientists talking to leaders and having leaders change their message, and that will start changing public opinion. I also believe that we can do a lot with our TV anchors and our journalists. Newsprint, people don't believe, but people tend to watch television, and what is said on TV is considered sometimes by certain groups the truth. So having your meteorologist, the local meteorologist, explain things in terms of climate are really good ways of having a large audience start changing the narrative. I've often, told people, wouldn't it be cool to see a billboard on I-75 say, today the temperature will reach X. This is 4 degrees normal than the average, and just have, or an air quality will be Y. People need to be bombarded with these messages and see them in places where they always encounter them. So I think those are ways to start shifting the narrative. Jennifer, do you have an idea?
No, I'm going to leave that one to you.
All right, next we have one for Dr. Schaeffer. Are there model green bylaws for HOAs to consider, perhaps regarding outdoor lighting, fertilizer, transportation, solar, or landscaping?
Yes, again, I'll refer you to the Green Living Toolkit, to the, let's see, underwater resources. It's the Become a Clean Water Catalyst. So it's the neighborhood solutions. And there are links to model HOA bylaws for some of these issues, not all of them, but in particular for landscaping, fertilizer, and stormwater pond maintenance. Do you want to add to that, Ernesto?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact,
Since you supplied that information to me. Sorry, put you on the spot. Yeah, so they do exist, and then I'd also refer you to, yes, you
One thing that we have in Lee County is actually a calculator, a fertilizer calculator. It's very easy access. Natural resource with that. So yeah, that kind of information is directly to homeowners,
Mhm.
how to do this calculation of how much fertilizer to use and when, and all that stuff.
Yes.
So that's a big one, a good one.
I was going to also mention the Sea Grant agent. He's the statewide legal guru, Rupert.
Mer-
Talking about. Anyway, he specializes in helping communities with their bylaws, helping cities and counties with ordinances, et cetera. So
Is
maybe
it Thomas Rupert?
that's right.
Yes.
Thomas Rupert.
Mhm.
So a Google on him and you might find.
Not to go against Dr. Ann, but I experienced something interesting in the community of homeowners. If you let the experts talk about fertilizer and all stuff, they don't listen. So if you let the other partner or the other homeowner association talk, then they listen to them because they're more credible than the scientists. I mean, it happens a lot. So I let them talk among themselves. Talk among themselves. Who are you? What are you doing? And they do carry a good message. I'm sorry.
No, that's great to hear. So Anna, we have one for you. Can you provide examples of green infrastructure projects that water, wastewater utilities have done or are doing?
Well, mind you, I am less familiar with Southwest Florida. I do live in Palm Beach County, but I love taking people to a project out in Palm Beach County called Green K. And it was an area that was previous that was going to be sold off for development, but was purchased by the Palm Beach County water utility, wastewater utility. And they spent several years, I guess, restoring that site and then flooding it with wastewater from their treatment plant to be naturally filtered and create marshes. They created a 1.75 mile boardwalk that you can walk through there. And over a period, they've also created a nature and interpretive center at the front of it. But it is a fabulous example when you find out that this was ag land. They completely flooded it. It is now a habitat for birds, alligators, turtles, fish. You can walk all through it. You can see the cypress trees that have been planted and taken off in the uplands, and ducks, all kinds of nesting birds, wading birds come there. And I think it's a great example of, well, we don't have to just pump this water out. And even if it's treated, we can use the natural infrastructure and turn it into a public recreation space. Another really good example that I've tried to talk to people about is there is a golf community called Broken Sound. Their groundskeeper comes from Ireland and is an avid environmentalist. And he convinced this extremely swanky country club to implement green practices on their golf course. So they stopped mowing between some of the greens and seeded it with natural wildflowers that now attract butterflies and other birds. They put some bees nests in there. I was surprised they could do that, but they harvest their own honey. They've reduced they've changed the aquatic plant life around the lake features to filter some of their fertilizer, the extra phosphorus, and have stopped having to use copper sulfite in their lakes. He does tours of this facility. These kind of practices can be brought into our Gulf communities in Southwest Florida. They can be water retention areas. So there are examples. You have to kind of dig out and find them.
And we have time for one last question, which is, how does reducing your meat intake correlate to reduced water use?
Sure, I think that if you think more broadly about the source of your food, what your food ate, and what it took to make the food that your food ate, you start to see the food chain. And the further up you eat on the food chain, the more energy, the more water has to be put into the production of that final food product. So the water footprint of eating most all of our processed foods is very high because it isn't a first order food. Meat, especially beef, if it's raised in a sort of industrial ag process, requires a lot of water for the growing of the soy or the corn that's then used to feed the cattle, and then the processing facilities, et cetera. So all the way down the line, it's very water consumptive. I think if you go back to the Green Living Toolkit and to that meat calculator and check the footnote, click through those links and you'll find all the information, more information than you probably want.
Well, thank you again to both of you. We really appreciate this information.